so much for coming tonight. We are really excited to have you here. And like I said, I am very excited to tap into I'm sorry, you guys, I always brag. My red, wine, and blue team, everybody on here is phenomenal. They have so many talents. And Dale made the mistake of opening her mouth and saying that she used to teach public speaking. And so I was like, man, that would be an amazing training. So she is joining us tonight to, like I said, display one of her many talents and how to teach you all how to plan, be comfortable, do the best you can possibly be at being a public speaking pro. I'm going to bring it up and introduce Dale, and you can kind of see her background here. And like I said, she is a kick-ass organizer here in Southwest Ohio with me in the Cincinnati area. But Dale, I'm going to kick it over to you and let you start talking about your background.
Awesome. Thank you, Julie, and thank you, Julie. I am Dale. I am a regional organizer with RWB in the Cincinnati area, like Julie said. Uh, I started my career, though, in teaching. I got my Master's of Arts in Speech Communication at the University of Cincinnati and spent 10 years teaching public speaking, interpersonal, cross-cultural communication at several universities in the area, um, including University of Cincinnati, Northern Kentucky University, and Cincinnati State. And my pronouns are she, her. I absolutely love teaching. I still sometimes pick up a class here and there. So I was actually really excited and obviously still nervous because public speaking is hard. And I will share that I actually hated public speaking when I took it as an undergrad. Everyone had to take it at my school. And that was the case for all of my schools I taught at. Everyone had to take public speaking. So I didn't really like it at first. But then it's an amazing thing that you get used to it the more you do it. And because I am a college instructor at heart, we have a syllabus of things we're going to cover today. Julie's going to talk a little bit about the different opportunities that you might have for public speaking. We're going to talk about getting to know your audience, getting prepared for your speech, the actual event, and then a little bit about leveling up your public speaking going forward. Lily, I'll let you talk about kind of some of these public speaking opportunities that folks might have.
Absolutely. So if you have never really engaged in public speaking, and maybe if you're here, it's probably because you're not so happy with what's going on in the world. You want to see some changes in politics. You want to see new policies implemented in your communities. You want to see common sense candidates getting elected to office. So there's lots of opportunities to speak publicly in these kinds of situations. And it's always good to just to know the basics and be prepared, because obviously a lot of us have now going to our school boards and our city council meetings to speak up and share about issues and policies that are going through there. And rallies, demonstrations. Hey, maybe a bigger crowd. You might have the opportunity to go to your state house and maybe there's a rally out front there for reproductive freedom. You might be offered an opportunity to speak or share your personal story about how a policy is impacting you or impacting someone that you love. Legislative testimony. You guys might have not even known that you can go to your state houses and actually testify in front of committees about bills that are pending. And this sounds super formal and super scary. And I got to tell you something. I did it for the first time ever with Moms Demand Action. And I was completely underwhelmed by my state representatives. You think everybody's elected is super smart and they know exactly what they're doing and talking about? It was kind of eye-opening to sit in a committee room and listen to the conversation about the bill and how little some people actually knew about it. It was actually pretty empowering then to be able to get up and share like my own personal story. But obviously there's a lot of opportunities for things like this, like in front of elected officials at school board level, city council level, at your state house. But whatever other opportunities, maybe you're just going to have a small gathering of friends. Maybe you're invited to a neighborhood event. Maybe you have like a local political group like I do, where we organize around local issues. And there's opportunities to get up and talk at those gatherings as well. And then virtual events like tonight, like Dale got roped into doing. There's always opportunities to speak at this, or Red, Wine, and Blue does a ton of social media content. We love to amplify the personal, true stories of women organizing in their communities. So there's opportunities to tell your story to the camera and then have that come onto social media. So just want to lay out some of the opportunities that where you could utilize the skills that you were going to learn tonight in settings big and small. So definitely want you guys to get yourself comfortable doing that.
We're going to talk about getting ready, and that is the first step. But there are a few things that you're going to want to do. The first thing is knowing the rules and the agenda. So a lot of the time, I think what we're considering starting out with is going to a city council meeting, a community council meeting, a school board meeting, and they're going to have rules. You might have to sign up ahead of time. You might have to be a resident. There might be a time limit that you're going to need to be aware of. So kind of doing your research just on those parameters, on the logistics, and making sure that you're ready for whatever amount of time that they're going to give. The audience is interesting because I think that most of us think that we're going to go to a city council meeting and we're going to talk to city council. But you may live somewhere where the city council is not aligned with your values and you don't think they're going to listen. Same for your school board, same for your community council. So, the meeting leaders may be your target audience. You may be trying to convince them. You may be trying to speak to them directly, but you might also be trying to talk to the audience members. You might be trying to talk to the press who might be involved. There was a school board member in either Julie's district or the next district over, who was an extremist and said very ridiculous things and had the press there a lot. And that school district was able to bring enough attention to the things that she was saying by going up and refuting and speaking at these school board meetings to eventually get her removed from the board. So it may be that you're speaking to those city council members or community council members, but you might also be just speaking to the, you never know, one person who might be moved by the chance that you took to speak. It does take bravery. It does, you do have to kind of get over yourself and, to speak publicly, but there might be someone in the audience who really needed to hear what you had to say. And so that's where it should really start. Trying to have a goal in mind for your remarks is really important for a couple of reasons. One's, like I said, you're going to be trying to target your audience, whether it is the meeting leaders, whether it is the audience members, whether it's the press. But what do you want to do? Do you want to convince someone? Do you want to connect? Do you just want to raise attention? Are you trying to serve as a standard bearer of, good common sense, civics and government? And if you have those goals in mind of what you actually want to get out of that 2 minutes that you might have, by prioritizing and making sure that those important points are covered, having that goal in mind is going to help direct you to that. There's often a chance that if there's going to be a lot of people speaking, that they are going to slow you, shorten your time period. And so you'll want to be ready to make sure that you've got 2 or 3 points that you really want to say, and get started with those. Now, there is a quote by Abraham Lincoln that is one of my favorites, and it says, "If I have been given 6 hours to cut down a tree, I'm going to spend the first 4 hours sharpening the axe." And so preparation really is the key. I can't tell you how many times I have been through this presentation, how many times I have made notes on it, how many times Julie and I have talked about it. And so it really is going to make you feel more confident, make you feel stronger in your presentation once you've kind of been able to say it a few times. I highly recommend starting with an outline. It is really the key to any good communication, whether it's an essay or a speech. I actually kind of cheat by starting with what I really want to get through, almost like a tweet, a very succinct message that I want to get through. And then I extrapolate that to an outline, and then kind of during your speech, say what you're going to say it, say what you say. You don't want to just know your audience. You also want to know your topic. You probably do if you are there to speak, and whether it is at a school board, whether it's state legislature, whether you're hosting people at your house for one of our rally parties, um, you're going to want to know your topic, but you probably are, you already feel some passion for it, and that's going to come through. Uh, Reviewing the agenda and researching your panel is always a good idea if you aren't familiar with them. Uh, be prepared for follow-up questions, because they're often going to, if they are not necessarily aligned with your values, they're often going to try to, um, you know, get you off track. And so be prepared to have questions that maybe you weren't expecting, but be ready to just go back to those main points that you had. And while we definitely want to use facts to support our arguments, don't go overboard. People are going to get lost in a lot of statistics. And so you really are going to connect with people more with your own stories, your own experience, your own connection um, to the issue. And definitely do not repeat disinformation. And I think Julie speaks really well to that. I'm going to throw it over to her to let her talk about how important that is.
So do not repeat disinformation. I don't know if you guys have been to our training with Jess McIntosh where she talks about this, but it is a very hard thing to do, because our instinct is to immediately counter when someone says something that is just completely off the wall. But actually, that is very harmful. If you repeat disinformation, what it actually does is it kind of lodges in someone's brain, and 2 weeks later, you might get up and say, they are not, teachers are not grooming children. But then 2 weeks later, that person who heard you, all they remember is something about grooming children, and they don't remember the context. So when you're repeating disinformation, you are actually reinforcing it, even when you are trying to debunk it. So you never want to repeat disinformation. And that can be really, really hard, because maybe there's a really horrible policy that your school is trying to implement, say around transgender students, and they are saying just completely falsehoods, about what these students are doing, or the threats or the risks that they allegedly pose. And when you're making your presentation, you want to get up and you want to start saying how all these things are wrong. I had a friend actually do this, and she read me her speech, and I was like, no, cut that entire first paragraph. You do not want to reinforce those negative things, because like I said, people will remember that. And you're also introducing people in the audience who have never heard of this to negative things. So you do not want to put that in your speech. The other thing that's going to be really hard is if you are sitting there and you hear speakers before you and they say some of that stuff, your instinct is to immediately get up and say what that person said about teachers grooming, or what they said about that student, and you're repeating what they're saying. Again, you are just reinforcing it. What it is fine to say is to say, what so-and-so just said before me was a lot of disinformation. There's a lot of bad information out there. What they said is not accurate, but don't repeat what they said. Don't repeat the grooming comments and like the horrible things about, I don't want to know. I'm not even going to repeat the bad information. Whatever the bad thing that they're saying, do not repeat it word for word. You just want to dismiss it. That is misinformation. That's disinformation. Let me tell you about, this is why I'm here. This is what I care about, and share your information. The other thing too is if you only get 2 or 3 minutes. So if you get up there and start talking on their terms about their misinformation, you are arguing their facts. You are having their argument. You don't want to have their argument. You want to present your information, your personal stories. So don't waste your precious 2 minutes on that information. So again, that's the main thing. Do not repeat disinformation.
Just a little bit of a speech outline kind of workflow that I wanted to go through with a little bit of an example. And you're not always going to have time for all of these things. So this is kind of your overall goal of your outline, and then you're going to stretch or contract as need be for your time limits. So starting out with your opening, of course, you're going to always introduce yourself, and depending on the situation, you may say that you're a resident or how you're connected. You may also just kind of start off with a question or a fact or a joke or a story. So maybe one of those facts that, the few statistics that you drop in can be in that opening. So if I'm going up to my school board to talk about book bans, maybe I start out with, did you know that out of the 73 books that have been challenged in the last year, 64 of them were challenged by one person? Something to get their attention, get them kind of set the stage for what you're going to discuss, and hopefully have them listen to you for long. You also want to talk about your connection. That is always going to be the most meaningful aspect. People want to hear stories. They want to hear why you care about this. And so maybe I want to go and fight these book bans, but I'm actually not a parent. But I can say I'm an avid reader, and I know the importance of a safe and welcoming library that has all of the books that I might want to read and all of the books that maybe I don't want to read. And having them all available to me is really important. You're going to discuss the problem, and that'll depend on how much time you spend on that, will depend on uh, the kind of purpose of the meeting and whether everyone is familiar with the problem. So if you can keep it short, keep it short. Uh, but saying, talking about the time and the money that is wasted during these book challenges. And another great place to drop in statistics about that. And then a solution. And to be fair, you may not have a solution. Sometimes we don't have solutions yet. So if you do, though, having that ability to say, here's my suggestion. Have a set period for book reviews. We don't just challenge them all through the year. We have a set period where you can challenge book ban possibilities. And it is done by a committee who are all chosen by the community, and that there's a limit on how many you can challenge in 1 year, whatever your solution is. Um, and if you can impact that with the vision of saying, here's what that solution does, here's what that solution creates. This creates a library where kids have access to books that they can see themselves. And call to action is really powerful if you have one. And a call to action is basically some kind of immediate activity that your audience can take right away. And maybe that call to action is for the members of the panel to consider your solution. Maybe that call to action is to the audience to say, we've got a petition to try to implement this solution, and please sign it after the meeting. But having something specific, because, a lot of you who are familiar with Red Wine and Blue know that one of the great things we do is provide you ways to make a difference and be able to do something with feelings that you have inside. So having a call to action is so important, and it's something that Red Wine and Blue does really well. And as you can see, that it really does make an impact on showing up and making those changes. And then with your closing, a recap, and you kind of say what you're going to say it and say what you said. It's also a really great opportunity for another story or comment, saying, kids want to have certainty. And if they have certainty and consistency that their library has the books that they can see themselves in, it's a better environment for everyone. So that goes through a couple of minutes. Like I said, you can stretch it if you have the time. You can condense it if you don't have the time. But that is kind of a good workflow for your overall speech. And I actually just I just saw something in the chat about not being heard. And it's true. I have two senators. One senator would listen to me, but we already agree. And the other senator won't. And I'm not going to talk to them. I'm going to talk to the audience members. I'm going to talk to the people who are sitting in the audience and don't think anyone feels the same way they do. They don't think that there are people willing to get up and talk and say the things that are difficult. So you're not necessarily saying it for the people at the front of the room. You're saying it for the folks who are sitting in the seats next to you. Don't forget, practice makes perfect. Sorry, that one just kind of caught me, and I was like, you know what? We need to think about that. Having notes is a great idea. I do not recommend note cards because we'll drop them, they'll get confused, out of order. I like to have a piece of paper with just high level notes. Sometimes it's just a couple of words. You want to avoid reading word for word because it does not have the same energy as extemporaneous ad hoc speaking. So have a piece of paper so that you make sure you remember those main points, but do not type out your speech, and try to keep it as minimal as possible. I recommend standing up while you are practicing your speech. I'll tell a little story later about why I like that so much, but it really does make a difference. Stand up, look in the mirror, and actually, if you really want your extra credit, record yourself. Uh, Look at your tone, look at your eye contact, look at your speed. Uh, I'm a fast talker. I have to remind myself to slow down. I have to remind myself to not let my face betray all of my emotions. I didn't really realize how many faces I made until Zoom. And now that I know, I can try to keep it in check when the situation calls for it. So definitely recommend recording yourself, even if you're the only one who ever sees it. It's super, super helpful. So here's why I say to stand up. Back in college, I was in a sorority and occasionally was called to the judicial board, is what it was called, because things happen. And sometimes sorority girls are kind of judgmental. And I got called for something, and it's kind of intimidating to go in there and have 7 women across the table from you making their judgmental faces. And so the next time I got called in, I stood, went in and I stood, and they were all sitting at the table like they were before. And I just stood. And they said, "Do you want to sit down?" And I said, "No, I do not want to sit." And they said, "Okay, well, all right." And so started to talk. I started to answer. And they said, "Are you sure you don't want to sit down? Like it seems uncomfortable." I was like, "I am very comfortable standing up." And they said, "It just makes us uncomfortable." And there's something about that standing that kind of shifted the balance in our power relationship. And it seems silly that it would be so insignificant as to just, we're saying the same things, we're in the same situation. There's still 7 women across the table from me with their judgmental faces. But they were really shook by the fact that I was standing up. And that kind of power is really helpful, not only when you are practicing your speech, but if you're able to stand when you give.
And I shared my story with you, Dale, about the eye rolling. So 100% back her up on record yourself and watch her facial expressions because you really may not know how you look. I told her I was a young prosecutor and I got called up by a judge because he said I rolled my eyes at my not my co-counsel, the opposition. And I had no idea I had rolled my eyes. So, it's good to see yourself and see what you're doing.
So we are going to try to get to where we're actually talking. So this is Drew. If anyone knows Drew, he is one of those people who can give that speech sitting down. He doesn't need to stand up. So when it is actually time to speak, it is okay and it is normal and it can be great to be nervous. There's adrenaline in it. It's going to excite you. You're going to show up with more energy. Um, I highly recommend showing up early if it's possible. Get a good seat, scope out the room, walk off your nerves, um, get make it your space. And no matter the topic, the passion is what makes a speech powerful. I remember I had a class, a public speaking class, where the students, everybody had to take it. No one was taking it because they wanted to take public speaking. And about half the class happened to be in engineering school, and the other half of the class happened to be musical theater majors. And if you want two more vastly different groups of people in a public speaking class, I can't think of them. Um, but I said to my engineering students, talk about something you know and care about. That knowing and caring will show through, and it's okay to show emotion, and it's okay to be excited. And just because we don't understand necessarily the specifics of how your slot car works that you made and built, doesn't mean that we won't enjoy your speech, because it's about that energy, it's about that passion, it's about that emotion and that connection with your audience that comes from really feeling strongly about your topic. And so talk about what you know, talk about your personal experience. And I also have a few little things that I try to do: meditating, taking deep breaths, box breathing, which is you inhale for 4 counts, hold it for 4 counts, breathe out for 4 counts, hold it for 4 counts. It's one of my favorite things to do, kind of calm myself when it's time to get up in front of a big auditorium. Giving yourself pep talks in the mirror. I am a big proponent of positive thinking, and it really does help. Um, Turning to your cheerleaders, and even turning to your cheerleaders to show up and sit in the room with you. Have your friends come out and support you. Wear all the same t-shirt, wear the same color t-shirt, so that they know, the audience knows, the panel knows, the meeting, whoever's running the meeting knows that you've got support in the audience. That's another thing we know at Red Wine and Blue, is that the power of the collective is super, super important and super strong. And then remember that everyone is vulnerable. Everyone is vulnerable. Think to yourself of a time that you were in a vulnerable situation. Think hypothetically about being in a vulnerable situation, and maybe kind of picture your audience in that vulnerable situation, reminding yourself that we're all nervous. They do say to imagine your audience naked. I wasn't going to go that far, but yes, they do. But whatever vulnerability works for you, try to remember that no one is coming to that meeting to see you fail at public speaking. They're not probably going to remember most of the speeches. So I always kind of remind myself to get over myself a little bit, and remember that, not everyone is going to remember everything I said. Not everyone is going to remember my great speech. And so I should probably not be too nervous about it. And like I said, taking a walk, sometimes just getting that nervous energy out of you does a world of difference. When we want to talk about taking it to the next level and leveling up uh, your public speaking, and kind of going from your smaller house parties and rallies, we've got a few opportunities for you to really take that to the next level on the next slide. And the first one is developing kind of a stump speech. Politicians all have a stump speech where they're kind of talking about their road to politics, what they want to do, why they want to do it, how they're going to do it. I always really challenge, my volunteers who want to get more involved, to kind of craft your activism origin story. We all kind of have that clicked for us, where we were like, oh, now I need to really get involved. Sometimes it's, the election of a president that we never thought we'd see. Mine was going door to door for Michael Dukakis when I was 9 years old, because my parents said, do you want Democrats in office? And I said, what are Democrats? And she said, they care about people. And I said, I care about people. And she said, all right, well, it's time to go door to door for Michael then. And that's my origin story. But coming up with your origin story, why you're in this work, why it's so important to you, what led you here, and what you're going to do with this energy, um, is really, really helpful and really important. Finding your voice, how you speak, with what vocabulary, showing your personality. Do not change yourself terribly much for your speaking. You're going to feel more comfortable saying the words that you would usually use. There's no reason to get overly fussy and overly formal, because it's not going to land in the same way as when you're actually connecting with your audience as your individual, true, vulnerable self. Uh, like I said, stand up to speak whenever possible. It really does change how you feel. I actually used to, my class would know that they were in trouble and had done poorly on the test if I came in wearing high heels. They knew that that was my power move, and they were going to be in trouble. And starting small, you don't have to start off doing legislative testimony. You don't have to start off at a rally. You can start off with your local progressive group. You can host a party at your house and encourage your friends and family to vote and be informed voters, and talking about what's important to you, to the people that you love and know and care. And then, if possible, follow up. If you've been given an opportunity to speak in front of a group, send a thank you now. If you spoke to a reporter, follow up and thank them for the opportunity. I'm just a big fan of thank you notes in general, and having those touch points and having those manners, so to speak, go a long way when you're going to be in their lives and causing trouble on a regular basis.
I actually have a couple of questions, though, that I thought maybe we would want to go ahead and address.
Sure.
The first one, you kind of went over this a little bit. A lot of folks were talking about nerves, and I just, even personally, can't say enough that even as many times as I have publicly spoken in my lifetime, and I'm a former politician as well, you still get nervous, and that's going to happen. But you kind of breathe through it, work through it, and keep going. So that was the first thing that a lot of folks mentioned. Then there was some chat in the chat about when you are actually making or you're talking in front of school boards or maybe legislatures or committees who don't listen. Is it worthless? So I say no, but Dale, I'd love to hear what you have to say.
Never worthless, because there are other people in that room listening. If they're not in that room listening, they might be, seeing the video, seeing it on social media. I think we learned on this call with the stories that have been shared, that a lot of us who feel alone are not alone. There are other people who are feeling this way. Also, getting stuff in the public record, even if they're not listening to you right then and there, documentation is a great thing, and making sure that your comments are on the record. But yes, nerves are tough. Nerves, you'll always have them. Like I said, I did meditation earlier today for this. And yeah, if you don't think they're not listening, they probably are listening, and there's certainly other ears that are there to hear what you have to say, and are glad that you were able to speak.
And then
That's how you
last
build
one,
a movement.
Yeah.
I was gonna say that's how you build a movement is
yeah.
like you have to have someone stand up to start. And I will, my community, I know there's some of you guys that live in super red communities and it's not going to change for a while. I live in a community that was pretty red, moving purple. And the first time that we started organizing, one of our opposition people basically told our candidate, oh, ha ha, you'll have like 5 votes because nobody there votes for your party. Well, you know what? We just elected our first school board member and our first city council person 5 or 6 years later. It takes a while to get there. But if nobody had ever gone and spoke up and no one ever challenged them, the other people wouldn't have joined. So, they now know that there's more than 5 or 6 of us.
This one last thing, and Julie, I thought maybe you might address this one. Someone liked the idea of our Project 2025 handout that we had and said, are there other topics that we might have? And I know we have other things too that folks could use that are on our website so that folks aren't reinventing the wheel, is what the person said. And I thought, well, we can address that because I know we have quite a few resources on our website.
Oh, absolutely. So if you go to redwine.blue, that is our website. We have a campaign up there for Save IVF and birth control, because that's obviously a huge issue right now. So there's a whole web page there with all kinds of information, explanation. We also have one on called The More You Row, which is about abortion. We have the Project 2025. We have a page that explains Moms for Liberty. So if you have friends who don't know what that group is, there's a bunch of information. Every one of our states, so Ohio, Michigan, North Carolina, Virginia, and Pennsylvania, have a state page that goes over the issues that are going on within your own state. We have a Troublemaker resources page on there. So there's videos, there's a parent playbook you can download, there's a Troublemaker guide that's all about how to organize in your community. I mean, someone else, I know Jen's on here, Dale's on here. Anybody else got anything to say about that I'm missing?
I
Jen
would
has
also,
been blessedly dropping the links, so that's really helpful.
Oh, yes, I have seen Jen dropping links to everything in there. I appreciate it. When I'm screen sharing, I was sharing the slides. I can't get off that or I screw up my slides. But yeah, we have a ton of things on that on our resource page. And then honestly, if you've never been on our YouTube page, we create a lot of content. A lot of content. So you can go on our YouTube and you can find short videos to share. You can find recordings of these types of things to share. But there's definitely a multitude of resources on there. And if you're looking for something and you can't find it, you can always email us. I'm Julie at redwine.blue, or you volunteer at redwine.blue. And we can try to help you find what you're looking for.
Okay, that's all I have.
thank you all so much for coming and listening and sharing stories and being vulnerable. And I really hope to hear from you. I really hope to hear that you all are out there telling your stories and having this bravery. We can do great things.